Okay, everybody. Today we're going to go through Chapter 3, Section 2 and 3, Amending the Constitution. I've combined the two sections because it makes sense. They both deal with how to amend the Constitution. So our goal is to understand what the different ways are to formally amend or change the wording of the Constitution. And then also what different ways is the Constitution changed without a formal amendment, without actually changing the wording of the Constitution. So by the end of this, you should be able to explain how we formally and informally amend the Constitution. When we talk about formal amendments, we're talking about official amendments, constitutionally amended amendments. How's that? Say that real quick. Formally amended amendments. It's the ways we officially or constitutionally amend the Constitution. In Article 5 of the Constitution, our founding fathers laid out exactly how the Constitution would be amended. Because under the Articles of Confederation, it was way too hard to amend the Articles of Confederation, and therefore they completely scrapped that government and started fresh with the Constitution. So there's two parts to actually passing an amendment to the Constitution, formally, officially, constitutionally. First, an amendment has to be proposed. And according to Article 5, an amendment is proposed by Congress, either by a two-thirds vote or at a national convention called by Congress at the request of two-thirds of the states, which nowadays would be 34. Once it has been proposed by Congress in either of those two ways, it then must be ratified, and that's where the states come in. There are two ways an amendment can be ratified according to Article 5 of the Constitution. First, by either a 3/4 vote of the state legislatures, which today would mean 38 states, or by conventions held in 3/4 of the states, where delegates representing the state, that particular state, get together and vote. So let's be very clear. In order to pass an amendment, the amendment first must be proposed by Congress, either by a two-thirds vote or by a national convention called by Congress at the request of two-thirds of the states, and then it must be ratified by the states, either by a vote of 3/4 of the state legislatures or by conventions held in 3/4 of the states. Proposed and ratified. So what is the most common way to propose and ratify amendments? We have 27 amendments to the Constitution. 27 times Congress and the states have proposed and ratified an amendment. So what is the most common way? Take a look at the two ways to propose and two ways to ratify here, and ask yourself which makes more sense to propose and which one makes more sense to ratify. I'll give you a moment. You might want to pause the video here to contemplate that question. If you said that two-thirds vote of Congress to propose is the most common, you would be correct. It's actually the only method that's been used. All 27 amendments have been proposed by a two-thirds vote of Congress, which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense. Why would the states request, two-thirds of the states request Congress to convene a national convention in order to propose the amendment, when a national convention that would consist of representatives from the states already exists? It's called Congress. So it doesn't make sense to go to that added time and expense to call a national convention when we already have a national convention. It's called Congress. So all the amendments have been passed by a two-thirds vote of Congress. Sorry, have been proposed by a two-thirds vote of Congress. And when it comes to ratification, with the exception of the 21st Amendment, which repealed the 18th Amendment, all the amendments have been ratified by a vote of three-quarters of the state legislatures for the same reason that Congress has voted directly to propose an amendment, because it doesn't make sense to have a state convention that would include representatives from that state, because that already exists. That state convention already exists. It's called the state legislature in each and every state. So the most common way and the only method has been to pass an amendment, has been to have a proposal by two-thirds vote of Congress and ratified by three-quarters of the states, with the exception of the 21st Amendment, in which they did call state conventions. Now you'll find this chart in your book on page 78, and it shows the 27 amendments, the year that they were ratified, and how long it took for them to be ratified, from the time that they were proposed to ratification by three-quarters of the states. And you'll notice they range anywhere from 6 months, 11 months, a couple years, all the way to 202 years. The 27th Amendment took 202 years. It just wasn't that important. We'll be talking about it in more detail, but suffice it to say it wasn't that important. And there's no time requirement. How long the states get to ratify a proposed amendment, there's just no time limit. So the states took their time with the 27th, and in 1992 Michigan finally got around to passing it, and we had our 27th Amendment. Again, that's on page 78. So we've looked at how we formally amend the Constitution. We've done it 27 times. Formally, officially, constitutionally, according to Article 5 of the Constitution. However, the reality is that we informally, unofficially amend the Constitution almost on a daily basis. We do it in 5 ways. And basically what's happening is changes are made to the Constitution over time without actually changing the written word. Those 27 amendments all change the written word of the Constitution, either by adding, changing, revising, altering, deleting. However, we change the rule book, we change the Constitution on a nearly daily basis through these 5 methods that you see on the screen right now. So I'm going to briefly explain each one. Remember that the Constitution is the rule book for government, and we change the rules formally according to the Article 5. But we change them informally as well, without actually changing the words within the Constitution. We do it through basic legislation. When Congress passes a law, essentially, it's amending the Constitution. It's making changes to the rules or the rule book without actually changing the written word. When it comes to basic legislation, for example, originally the Constitution created the judicial branch, but only the Supreme Court, and left the rest of the judicial branch of our federal court system to Congress to organize. So one of the first things Congress ever did is it passed the Judiciary Act of 1789 and created the rest of the judicial branch, the rest of the federal court system at that time. And they have continued up until present day to continue to structure and restructure the judicial branch through basic legislation. A second way is through presidential action. Congress has the power to declare war, Article 1. However, the president is the commander-in-chief, Article 2. And so what has happened is the president, through presidential action, has essentially declared war. He's committed troops to foreign engagement, um, uh, foreign engagement, without a declaration of war. It's happened hundreds of times, to the point now where even though the Constitution doesn't say the president gets to declare war, the president, through his actions, is essentially declaring war. He's making war. Is that unconstitutional? No. He's exercising his powers as commander-in-chief. He is redefining and rewriting the rule book unofficially. Perfectly constitutional as long as he operates within the Constitution. We'll be talking more about that when we get to the presidency. Also, by key Supreme Court decisions, we unofficially change the Constitution without actually changing the words. For example, the well-known Supreme Court decision in Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, 1954, the ruling by the Supreme Court was that separate was inherently unequal. So segregation in public schools and other facilities, public facilities, was not legal, was not constitutional. When we look at, later on in the year, we'll look at many other key landmark Supreme Court cases, and we'll see how they've changed the rules. They've informally, unofficially amended the Constitution. Also, the political parties have amended the Constitution unofficially and continue to do so. For example, originally in the Constitution, there's no mention of political parties. There's no mention of the presidential nominating system that we have today, of presidential primaries, of debates, of the parties settling on one candidate and then that one candidate representing the party in a presidential election. There's none of that, but the political parties have taken that role and have created our presidential nomination system. It doesn't say it anywhere in the Constitution, but the political parties, through their actions within the Constitution, legally, they have altered how we elect the president. When we look at Congress and their day-to-day activities, the political parties play a key role in the rules that Congress operates under and the leadership that Congress operates under. And then lastly, we informally amend the Constitution just by custom and habit. For example, when President Washington did not accept a third term, did not run for a third term, he created a precedent, a habit, a custom of a president only serving 2 terms. No president sought a third term until FDR in 1940, and those were extraordinary times. It didn't say in the Constitution that a president was limited to 2 terms at the time, but that became the custom. And what happens sometimes is custom becomes a formal amendment, as it did in this case with the 22nd Amendment, which made it 2 terms for a president. And our last example is the custom of the vice president actually taking the oath of office when there is a presidential vacancy, when a president has either died in office, resigned, or has been removed. The Constitution originally just said that the vice president takes over the responsibilities and duties of the presidency. It doesn't say they take the oath of office and become president. However, that became the custom. With each presidential vacancy, the vice president would take the oath of office and become president, even though the Constitution didn't say that. So through custom, we altered the Constitution. Now, just like our previous example, the 25th Amendment made that a formal amendment, and now the vice president constitutionally takes the oath of office. Okay, we'll see you in class. See how well you know the information.